Welcome, welcome to this iteration of the Bird's Eye View. As you can see, I am still here with Dummy Twisted because his camera's
Hello.
not quite set up yet. All right. So with everything going on right now, what's so I'm a federal employee. You are not. What's your opinion about what's happening with Dodge and Trump right now and in the federal workforce stuff? Like,
Me, it doesn't really affect me at all.
okay, so it doesn't. If do you have an opinion of it?
I
Like,
mean, I wouldn't say I have a
how do
hard
you
opinion.
see it as a non-federal employee that so far 60,000 people have been laid off by Trump and Dodge?
It sucks. It really does suck.
So,
I don't
cause
like when
like,
anybody gets laid off.
yeah, and that's kind of the thing is like you hear a lot of people are like, oh, good, federal employees, blah blah. And here's the thing is I disagree and don't disagree with what he's doing at the same time. And that's coming from a federal employee point of view. Um, the problem I have is most federal employees are actually doing a function for the public.
Yeah.
And this is where I kind of have the problem with it is there's a big outrage when like right now, like all the tariffs, right? Like, oh, we're raising tariffs, oh, we've been losing jobs, this and that. And I was like, okay, you're upset that a car manufacturer is losing jobs, but you're not upset when they lay off 60,000 government employees. I kind of don't understand that myself. Like, to me, any laid off worker that didn't lose their job for cause is kind of bad, right? To me,
Yeah.
it doesn't God dang, what the hell? There you go. It's just bad, and I think that because some of these are families, people have houses and bills and all this other stuff, and I don't see I don't see how laying off all these workers is really going to help the situation because I thought the whole point of view was to get rid of the deep state.
Yeah.
And the definition of the deep state was what they were talking about was these non-appointed people that are making policy and doing things against uh, either the president's agenda or doing things on their own. Okay, if that's the case, the GS5 or 7 level worker that gets in with a bachelor's degree, and let's not forget that the federal workforce is one of the most educated workforces in the nation, bar none, because
Yeah.
almost everybody at least has a bachelor's degree.
Correct.
But that's neither here nor there. But my point is they are a highly educated group and they do a function. And just to get in at the base level GS5 making $30,000 a year is a bachelor's degree. And that's not a lot of money compared to a bachelor's degree what people think you should be making for a bachelor's degree. And so those are the people that are losing their jobs right now. And then the sentiment is, oh yeah, cut the government and get rid of the deep state. And then, oh, but the auto workers that are making 90, $100,000 a year, oh God, they lost their jobs. Like, it just seems odd, right? But okay,
Yeah.
let's go back to this whole Dodge cutting federal workforce to get rid of the deep state. So they getting rid of whole agencies at a time. They're cutting all. They want to cut all these probationary workers, and that to a point I don't necessarily have a problem with, right? The probationary folks, it's you have usually a 1 year when you get in to show that you can do the job, or if they decide that you can't do the job, then they let you go within that 1 year.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
And so you take that job knowing that it's not totally yours yet. You're not career vetted. And so, okay, government wants to cut some workforce. Those would be the first to go. I understand that cut. Okay. Now, the people have had to been in and working. And let's break this down for you, right? So a GS13 level or GS12 level about is a supervisor. A GS13 level is a low-level agency manager or a management analyst. A GS14 level is where you start dictating policy. You're assistant director or you're a bureau chief in DC. And a GS15, you are a agency director or you are an agency head somewhere and you are doing policy and stuff like that. And then you have these other people that aren't GS jobs, that are SES levels. They're like kind of appointed or contracted. It's a little weird. It gets a little messy after that. So if you're trying to cut out the deep state, the GS12 supervisor has no say at all. He has zero say. He's just managing a set of folks that do their basic job that have no say in policy. They just do what they're told to do and follow the guidance. The GS13 level has no policy say. They usually have some things or thoughts to say to the GS14 and 15 level of how they think things should go. But in the end, they don't have a say either. So if you're cutting out the deep state, you shouldn't be cutting jobs from the GS13 level and below. And really, maybe the GS14 in some cases, but GS13 and below aren't the ones making policy. They're not the ones doing or creating decisions or anything doing policy. They're simply the people that are pushing policy out that's been dictated by the upper echelon, or they're following orders. And that's it.
Yeah.
So Dodge cutting jobs that are GS13 below doesn't make any sense if their goal is to cut out the deep state. Because the deep state is GS15 and the SES level folks. And those are the people that really haven't really been targeted in these cuts so much. And that's, I guess we're like I said, I'm not against you cutting the federal workforce, especially if your goal is to cut out the deep state. I think the government branches should be following whatever the president decides is his agenda, regardless of their political views.
Yeah.
But the GS15 and higher folks, the SESs and all those are the folks that if you want to target somebody that has some policy making decisions and stuff like that, those are the people that should be getting cut. But okay, so we've kind of explained the government agencies' GS levels and how that part is set up for the managing and everything. Because really what it goes is GS from the bottom to GS11 is just a regular worker that just has no say, just does whatever they're told. GS12 around there is a supervisor, and they're managing the people below them. And they're just doing whatever management tells them to do. And then you have the GS13 that are managing the supervisors, that are making sure the supervisors understand the policies that are coming from management, upper management, GS15s, or coming from the 14s and 15s in Washington, D.C., the headquarters. So, for example, in my office, I'm a GS-13, but I have zero say in what goes on in my office. My sole job is to report what I see happening, make sure that what is happening in my office is accordant with all the government regulations and stuff, and then to report up the chain of command. I have zero say what happens in my office. Zero.
Oh wow.
Not one iota. Like I give my recommendations to the GS-14s and 15s because what my job is audit and oversight of the government contract. So the government wants a job done, and they hire they put out a contract. A private company wins that contract and agrees to do the job for that contract amount of money, and then agrees to do the job within those guidelines. My job is to make sure they follow those guidelines.
Oh, okay.
But I don't have any say of what they do. I can't tell them to change anything because I would be changing the contract, and I can't do that. That's not part of my responsibility. That's the contract holder in Washington, D.C. So I have zero say. My job is simply audit and oversight is reporting. Make sure that things are going as normal. If there's a problem, then I investigate the problem. I write up a report, give it to the chain of command. Chain of command goes to wherever. So, for example, just so if let's just say that a government agency is giving something to the public, right? The government doesn't necessarily make that item or produce that item. Somebody else does. So if something happens within that, we have to go and figure out what's happening, and then that's a separate contract. And so that contract holder has to contact that agency, even though I'm the original reporting agency of that there was a problem. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, we have zero say how the office is run. And then, so my assistant director, his job is to manage us. There's 6 of us in that office. And so his job is to manage us and then manage any of the day-to-day office bills and things that happen day to day. The office director manages the 2 assistant directors, which is my boss is assistant director, and then his boss is the director. He manages 2 separate agencies, and he makes sure that headquarters and those understand what's happening at that level, at his agency's level, and how what's gonna impact them in the future, and how they need to be prepared to combat any future happenings so they don't get caught short later on a year or 2 down the road. Because the last thing we want is to not be able to provide the necessary services to folks because somebody didn't look far enough ahead and realize that that something was gonna happen. There was gonna be an increase in demand or something that would cause that kind of a problem. You following along so far?
Yeah, I got
Okay.
you.
So if you cut the people that are providing the actual service, which is kind of what Dodge is doing right now, there is no way that it can't affect the end user, which is the public.
Okay.
So that's kind of the whole thing. And if you kind of have watched what Dodge has done, they've attacked agencies that don't initially impact the U.S. public. Like, for example, USAID. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about USAID. Because this is something that nobody has talked about, and I can't believe that hasn't happened. So USAID is kind of a misnomer. The what do you think USAID does, Twisted?
AIDS the U.S.
Right. You would think by the name that somehow they provide service to the United States or the
Yeah.
citizens. They actually don't do that at all. So, what USAID does is provide money overseas. So here, USAID is the U.S. Agency of International Development.
See, I didn't know that.
Right. Because USAID sounds so much nicer and it sounds like it's helping somebody out here. Right?
Yeah, but in fact, it doesn't.
But in fact, it doesn't. Now, what USAID was intended to do was to provide U.S. influence overseas by way of helping people out, helping them get schools and helping them with medical stuff and helping them with building communities and stuff like that. As a front to push political agendas.
Really?
Yeah. So what happened somewhere in the line is there was actually this program. I forgot what it's called at this moment. But actually, let me hold on one second. Okay, so there was a particular act. I don't think this is. I don't think it's no. I don't think it's the Smith-Mundt Act. But anyway, there was a particular set of laws that made it illegal for propaganda to be used against United States citizens. Right? So,
Yeah.
the CIA could therefore use propaganda, radio networks, news, all these other things overseas to kind of force the U.S. agenda through U.S. aid to get kind of push their political viewpoint, right? So you want to build a U.S. base, and you have some political people there that don't want that. Suddenly, there's all these news stories and newspaper articles and all this about how this person's corrupt. Suddenly, they're indicted or they get voted out, and a new friendly person gets all this money and gets voted in, and suddenly the U.S. has a base there. So
Okay.
that kind of propaganda was illegal in the United States. Now, I think in 2013, Obama did not re sign that. Therefore, it expired and made it legal for propaganda to be used in the United States. Hence, Russian disinformation. Paid for by you, the citizen, because it just got routed through US aid and then brought back.
Oh my God.
Okay, it gets worse because this is the real point that I wanted to tie this to. And this is where nobody's talking about this, and I don't know why, and it bothers me a little bit. So, what Dodge found out is that all this US aid money, billions of dollars, was getting pushed to these NGOs, these non governmental offices. For the lack of a better term, shell company. Because that's basically what it is. And so these NGOs would then get all this money from USAID, and then they would give that to other NGOs, to other NGOs, to other NGOs, and then those fifth or sixth generation NGOs down the line were all of a sudden donating to a bunch of Democratic people running for office. Wait a minute.
God.
Isn't that illegal? Anyway, So, then what those people were doing was they would get in the office and then they would say, "Oh, we're not gonna put criminals in jail. Why would we put criminals in jail? That's just filling up the jails. They're bad people. We just let them out so they commit more crime. Then they commit violent crime. And then this is where it really ties together. They commit violent crime, go to jail, get let back out because the judge who was appointed by the guy who got money from the NGO, 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 from USAID, put his judge in there that's doesn't want to put people in jail. Does this sound familiar at all to you yet? Like, Seattle, where the no police zone, Chicago, where defund the police, all these places with all this massive violence, right? And then what they do is they say, "Oh my God, gun violence! We have to do gun regulation because there's so much crime that I, being the politician that got money from the NGO, from the NGO, from the NGO, from the NGO, from USAID, put in a judge to let people back on the street to commit more violent crime. Because I want my agenda of gun legislation." This is what they're not talking about. The violence that is occurring in your state, in your city, was paid for by you in your taxes, and it's the fault of your people that are in those offices letting the criminals out so they can then push gun registration. How is that? How is that for a circular, fraudulent piece of work? So why do you think they're so upset that Dodge is getting rid of all these BS contracts and shutting down all this money to the NGOs? Why? Because those are the ones that's how they were getting their money to run and to get into offices. So they could do their anti-gun legislation and other political ideologies that they have. Isn't that so weird?
It's unbelievable.
So from somebody from the outside who's in fact been what is it? You're not a victim, but you have been involved in a gun violence. How does that make you feel?
Not great.
Not great. So here's the moral of this thing. Is, do I agree with what Trump's doing? Yes and no. I do, because I think the government needs some cleanup. But for me, you need to cut the head off and leave the legs and the arms to do the job. But I'm not in charge of anything, so that's that. But but people really need to look at all this money and where it was going and why the people are upset. Why are they so upset? They're so upset because that money that they were getting. Like, for example, one of the judges, after Trump stopped all the payments from USAID, he was a judge, and I think it was Hawaii. And on the weekend, at like 1:30 a.m., he issued a restraining order to prevent Trump from stopping those payments and forcing those payments. Now, why would a judge in the middle of the night, on the weekend, when he's only on call, not just wait for Monday morning when nothing's getting done over the weekend anyway, but why wouldn't he just wait till Monday morning and have the active judge look at the case and then maybe actually call people from the Trump administration and to get some facts before issuing a ruling. Why wouldn't he do that?
I have no idea, but
Well,
nothing legitimate.
maybe, just maybe, his wife gets money from US aid.
God.
So, of course, I want my wife to get money from the US aid, so I'm going to put a TRO. And here's the thing, instead of a stay order, which can be immediately appealed, a restraining or TRO, a temporary restraining order, cannot. There is no function in the court system to appeal a restraining order. Those are automatic, and they're like temporary, 10 to 14 days, and you cannot at all appeal them.
That's awful. Yeah,
So,
I mean, I guess, yeah.
so we have a corrupt judge on the weekend putting a restraining order to stop or to make sure that these payments go out because his wife gets money from it. And then they get mad at Trump when he's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Not to mention the fact that the lower courts technically don't even have jurisdiction to interfere with the man that was elected by 80 million people in the United States.
Yeah.
The only court that really has say is the Supreme Court. But yet somehow these lower courts are overriding the electoral or the executive branch by these restraining orders. And really what they're doing, because Trump only has 4 years to get anything done, is all this is just delay. Because the longer it takes him to do any one thing means he can't get everything that he wants done in a timely fashion.
Yep, he won't have the time, and if they keep pushing all this red tape.
So when we made this video, I just wanted people to think a little bit. Like I like that Twist is not all involved in that stuff. So when he hears some of this stuff, he's like processing, and then you get that reaction from him. So
yeah, because I didn't know about any of that, so
so
kind of flooring.
So from the start, when I asked you what's your opinion now of what you've heard and kind of what's going on?
Very much mixed. Before I didn't care, and now it's very much mixed.
Right, before it didn't touch you. And so it's just something you see, and you can feel bad about people losing their job, but it didn't touch you, right? It doesn't affect your life.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden it does.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And that's kind of the big picture item here is you don't have to like Trump. You don't even have to agree with everything he's doing. But if you are even rationally a sane individual and not completely delusional, then you have to admit that some of the things that he's doing is the right thing to do.
Yep.
And it's long overdue. I heard a clip the other day from 30 years ago about Nancy Pelosi getting on her soapbox and screaming about tariffs, Chinese tariffs. 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Nothing has been done in 30 years. They were screaming about Chinese tariffs back then. Donald Trump is the first president to really address this and to do anything about it. And now they're mad at him for doing something they've been talking about for 30 years.
Yeah, they have no right to be mad at him for it.
Now, stocks are down. Um, and the economy is swirling right now. People have no idea what's going to happen, and uh, so because of that, the stock market's down. Right when people aren't confident and they hold on to their money, the stock market tends to flounder. Even though if you ever want to get in the stock market, there is no better time than sometime around now. Now, don't take monetary advice from me, but the whole point is save some money, wait till you feel like the economy is hit rock bottom, invest all that money because it will come back up eventually. And if you are already in the stock market and you've lost a bunch of money, you might as well just ride it out, because if you try to cut your losses now, you'll miss the rebound and you'll have lost a lot of money. But like I said, don't take financial advice from me. Do your own research. But this is kind of what's happening. Trump has done something with the tariffs, and already you have Vietnam, you have Canada, you have all these other countries going, okay, wait a minute, we'll remove all of our tariffs from the United States, because here's the thing: is the United States has only been at like 3% or something like that, where the rest of the world tariffs United States goods by like I think it's like 30% or something like that.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous amount.
Right. So the rest of the world has been taken advantage of for far, far too long. And to be honest, what I would like to see is, and what they're kind of seeing, because I think Elon and they posted something that they've already got $1 trillion worth of investments in manufacturing inside of the U.S. due to these tariffs. Companies are building manufacturing plants here. They're creating jobs here. They're creating manufacturing here because of Donald Trump's tariffs. Now,
I see that as a win.
in the 1940s, when the United States was at their heyday of manufacturing because of the war, this seems like a return of the sleeping giant, the manufacturing in the United States of America. No more of these cheap goods from China and India and overseas because of it's cheaper, because the United States not charging tariffs. Now it's the great equalizer. Now maybe we get a return to U.S. made goods. But
Hopefully.
this all was just food for thought. I know it's a little bit of rambling kind of format, but I just wanted to have a conversation a little bit. And just because I think a lot of these have been missed. And like I said, I have heard nobody talk about these NGOs funding these Democrats to put these judges in place to let these criminals out so they can push gun control. But that is what's happening. Or at least it was. That is what was happening. But I haven't seen a lot of people talk about that. And that bothers me a little bit. Because I'm a 2A patriot. And as a combat veteran, I think that, people deserve the right of their First and Second, Third and Fourth Amendments. And right now, some of those things are getting splashed. Like, I think, in fact, in my own state, in Arizona, they just passed, or I think the Arizona Supreme Court just ruled in a case that said the right to remain silent can be used against you in court.
Really?
Yeah. That this guy said, I want a lawyer. I have the right to remain silent. So they said, okay. They took him to the police station. And then they asked him more questions. And he said, nope, I want to remain silent. And then they asked him more questions. And then he answered a question or two. And then he said, no, I want to remain silent. And then the Supreme Court ruled, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that, I think it was there, anyway, one of the courts in Arizona ruled that because he answered some questions and not others, that he could then be questioned in court in front of a jury about why he chose to answer some questions and not other. Why did you remain silent on this question? The right to remain silent
right.
being used against you, right? I fully expect that one to go to the United States Supreme Court, but this is an erosion of your rights, and this will continue to happen. I just saw another case somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there's now a 25-foot rule about you can't record police officers in a 25-foot space or something.
That's not right.
So, if you're recording and they reproach you and they're too close to you, they can demand you stop recording. And it's too late for you to move because they're already within that 25 feet. Now, if you don't, now you're in trouble. And if you do, then maybe they can confiscate your stuff. Maybe they can arrest you. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go. But these are the kind of people that are in power because of the fraud, these NGOs, and what USAID has done. These are the type of people that are in power right now. And we need to fight back to protect our rights and to be informed. Be informed and have these conversations and to really look at where your money's going when we pay taxes. But
Yeah.
enough rambling. Any last words, Twisted?
No, I don't think I got anything other than just wow.
All right. I'm sorry we've been really sporadic here. We're gonna try to get back on track a little bit. This is also why we didn't really have a bunch of things to show you today. This was just kind of a conversation today. But go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and like. Go ahead and just leave a comment. What do you think? Do you like this format? Would you rather like the other format? Let us know how we can improve. But with that, we're out of here today. Much love all. We will catch you next time.